If I may, I'd like to welcome our governor here today to the City National Bank building here in downtown Los Angeles and our Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation gathering here of our board members. If there was ever a person in this world who truly did not need an introduction, it is this man on my left. But I'm going to take a moment to do one anyway, because we are very grateful, Governor, for your leadership of this state in recent years, for your commitment to keeping our state competitive globally, economically, and to doing it in a way that is also favorable to our environment. Your commitment to improving the environment and the economy simultaneously is something that resonates with this organization. The LAEDC is made up of private sector and public sector participants. We are a nonprofit organization committed to improving the economy of the entire Los Angeles County area. There are educators here today, presidents of our universities. There are industry leaders from our entertainment and other industries. There are private professionals here from the legal and banking and consulting industries. And they are all committed to helping you advance the cause of California's global competitiveness. We understand that these are difficult times budget-wise, and we appreciate the serious approach you are taking to recognizing these challenges. And we recognize that you have a difficult job dealing with these realities, but that you also have solutions planned that will help us not only deal with the present challenges, but the challenges in years to come that you and other governors will face in dealing with California's revenue rises and falls. We're particularly interested in your leadership in the infrastructure area. We've worked with you through our Southern California Leadership Council in the last few years on your strategic growth plan and the infrastructure investments that had been so long neglected in this state, and we're very much appreciative of your leadership in making the necessary infrastructure investments to keep this state competitive. We know you have some exciting new ideas today about performance-based infrastructure and public-private partnerships to attract the kind of capital that will be necessary to make the investments that will help keep us competitive. And so we're assembled here today to hear your presentation on the budget, your strategies for dealing with the present situation, your vision for the future. And we hope you'll be willing to take a few questions at the end of your presentation. And we look forward to working with you to help keep this great state strong economically for many years to come. With that said, I want to welcome you. Thank you for being here and introduce our governor, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Bill, for the wonderful introduction. And I want to thank, of course, the LA Economic Development Corporation for having me here and for organizing this. And I also want to thank Tom Sheehy, who is here from the Department of Finance, who has done a great job. And anything you don't like about the budget, it's his fault. And everything that's good about it, it's mine, you know. So it's that simple. But anyway, we presented the budget yesterday and unveiled it, and we called a special session, emergency session, because of our budget crisis that we have. And so it's always good to go up and down the state and to talk to the people about what we are doing and let them ask some questions. And I always enjoy that, because I think that in the end, when I think about all of the things that we have accomplished in California these last 4 years, it's because people have been my partners. You know, they've been extraordinary. It's an extraordinary partnership we have developed, if it is with the help of the infrastructure, or if it is with the help of getting the workers' compensation reform done, or if it is now with the healthcare reform, or helping us with the environmental issues, with rolling back greenhouse gas emissions and all of those kind of issues. I think we were able to do together. And I think also what is important in order to get things done is obviously to have Democrats and Republicans work together. And the kind of issues that we are addressing shouldn't be political issues. And now, of course, we are facing some tough times this year and maybe also next year, but then I think we will rebound from that. And I think it's important first to just talk a little bit about the history of when I came into office, because it's very important to know that when I came into office and why there was a recall in the first place was because the state of California was, in bankruptcy. I mean, literally, if there would have been such a thing as a bankrupt state, California would have been, because we did not have the money to continue paying our bills, and the economy was going down. People were losing jobs. Companies were moving out of the state. So we were really in a disastrous situation. And but like I said, with the help of the people, we were able to turn it around. We did some very aggressive things right in the beginning. We rescinded the car tax increase, which gave back to the people of California annually between $4 and $6 billion. So if you add it all up, and now that means a return of $20 billion that went back to the people of California. Then we reformed workers' compensation, and now the costs of workers' compensation have been reduced all the way down to 63%. So it's a reduction of 63% average, and that again gave the people, or I should say businesses, back $14 billion in California. So you add those two things, you're talking about $34 billion went back to California and the businesses and to the people. Because there's always a question about, when you see a little fee increase or something, oh, the governor is increasing taxes. No, this is the last thing I'm interested in is increasing taxes. I want to give tax money back to the people of California because that's the only way we can stimulate the economy. It's the only way that we can really create job growth and all of those things that are so important. And I think this is why we have created almost 1 million jobs since I've come into office. And the job growth is still on, even though it's not as strong anymore as it used to be because of the housing market and the subprime mortgage crisis that we have that has a spillover effect. But nevertheless, we gave this money back to the people of California, and it was very helpful, and we will continue doing that. And that's also the idea, of course, when you talk about healthcare reform. The idea is, again, to give money back to the people of California, and especially also to businesses, because right now we all are paying 20% of a hidden tax in healthcare, which ends up being around $14 to $15 billion a year. We want to get rid of that. That again goes back to the people and to the businesses of California. That's our objective with healthcare reform, lowering the costs and making access available to anyone that wants to have healthcare, and make it mandatory actually for everyone to have healthcare, and also to make sure that we don't have to close our emergency rooms and make sure that the people don't have to live in fear that their insurance policy get canceled if they have an illness, which happens so many times. We read it all the time. So we really want to bring stability in that and make everyone be insured. But anyway, again, we turned the economy around, and we have seen revenue increases. When I came into office, we had $76 billion of revenues. Now we have this year is projected approximately $96 billion. We have anticipated $101 billion of revenues, actually. But because of the housing crisis and the mortgage crisis and all this, our revenues are $5 billion short this year. And that, of course, creates a hole, a $3.3 billion hole for this coming fiscal year, this fiscal year, 2007, 2008, which could eventually go to $14.5 billion structural deficit if we don't do anything about it. And I'm talking about by next year. That is next year in June, we could go all the way to $14.5 billion. So we want to, of course, avoid that. And that's my responsibility as governor, to make sure that we balance our budget and that we live within our means and that we only spend the money that we have. Well, this state has never been really known for only spending the money that it has. I mean, the state always has been known as what the Wall Street Journal calls the culture of Sacramento's overspending, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, we have a system in place that has been disastrous for the state of California, and we have some charts here that I want to show you very soon. But I mean, what happens traditionally is, and what happened, it goes back decades, but it was very obvious during the Davis administration, 1999, 2000, when the revenues, really skyrocketed and went up by 23%. And immediately, everyone in Sacramento was very happy about expanding the programs and saying, oh, this is really terrific. We have now all these new revenues coming in, only to find out a year later that the revenues took a dive again, and this was only a temporary thing. So instead of taking some of that money and putting it into a rainy day fund, what they've done is just spend all of that money and obligated the state to continue spending that amount of money, even though there was no guarantee that money will ever come in again. So since then, we have been living with a deficit, with a structural deficit and also in debt, because what they did in the old days, meaning just 10 years ago and just, up to 5 years ago, whenever they had a shortfall of revenues, They just went and stole that money from everywhere else. They grabbed $1.2 billion from transportation. They grabbed billions of dollars from local government. And they grabbed money from pension funds. And, of course, the state then got sued. And when I came into office, we had to now start paying back all of those funds. So when McClintock talks about that I'm spending a lot of money, well, it is because we are paying back for the previous administration of all the debt that has occurred. We have to pay back twice the transportation money, and we have to pay back billions of dollars for the local government. We have to promise local government that we will never take money from them again. As a matter of fact, we then finally passed propositions, Proposition 42 and Proposition 1A and Proposition 58. And those propositions tightened the noose, basically, so the legislators can never borrow money for ongoing programs. We can borrow money and for sell bonds and so on for building infrastructure and so, but not for ongoing programs. So with Proposition 58, it was very clear that we can never borrow money for ongoing programs. With Proposition 1A, it made it impossible to steal money from local government. And from Proposition through Proposition 42, we are not going to take ever money again from transportation. Or if we take it, we have to give it right back. We can't steal it from them again. So that is tightening the noose. So we wanted to make sure that we tear up the credit card, basically, here in California. And that's what we have done. But it's still, the budget system itself still is a problem because, as I said, we still, when we have peaks, we don't put money aside in a rainy day fund. I tried twice during the time I've been in office so far to try to change the budget system, but I have not been successful. I tried right immediately after I came into office, that following, I was sworn in on November 17th, 2003, and literally a half a month later, we tried to pass legislation to change, the budget system itself, and to put it then on the ballot, but we were not successful. We then it was voted down, and then we came back and negotiated the compromised version. Compromised version means that we only allowed now to take 1% of our revenues and put it in the rainy day fund. So as you can see, that when we had budget revenues of $85 billion, so we put $850 million in the rainy day fund. Well, we have accumulated almost $4 billion this way. But when you fall short in just a half a year by $5 billion, that money is gone like nothing. So therefore, we have to really go back and look at that again. And this is what this is all about this year, is to go and work out with the legislators a better system, a system where we can take more money aside if we have peaks in our revenues, take more money from that $2 or $3 billion, put it in the rainy day fund. So when we have a crisis and the revenues go down, we can then fill those things, and we don't have to take vulnerable citizens through this roller coaster ride. Because right now it's like a roller coaster thrill ride, I call it, our budget, where people have to hold on for dear life. Because and it's not fair. It's not fair to education that we take our children on this roller coaster ride. That one year we have all the money, the next year we have less money. Schools cannot budget this way. Like right now, we are over-appropriating education $1.4 billion. But I cannot take that $1.4 billion away from education because the schools have already budgeted. They have already hired the teachers. They already filled the classrooms. That money is pretty much spent. So the only thing we could do is deduct and bring down by $400 million, but not the whole $1.4 billion, because in the end, I always say we got to protect our children. These are the most vulnerable ones because they don't have really advocates up there and lobbyists up there fighting for them, so we have to take care of them. So this is what we have done. So it's a very, very complicated situation when you bring in this Proposition 98 and all of those things, and all those spending formulas. We have endless amount of spending formulas in Sacramento where we have no decision power over those formulas. So you have a situation like this year where you have a flat revenues, not going down. We're not talking about our revenues are going downhill by any means. They're flat. They're just not increasing the 5% as we anticipated. They're just flat. But the spending formulas are saying that we have to increase our spending by 7.3%. So how do you do that? Where do you get the money from when we can't borrow for ongoing programs anymore? And thank God we can't. So what it basically means is like you all do, you have to live within your means. And here you can see on those charts here, I just wanted to point this out. This is our revenue and our spending lines. As you can see, the yellow, the spending line, is totally unrelated to the revenue lines. So there's no relationship at all. So whatever the revenues say and whatever comes in revenues, spending just goes out of control on its own. So you have these areas here where you then have billions of dollars of deficits. Then you finally, when I came into office here, we finally then managed to have the two lines meet. Now we're here, and now the revenues are flattening out. But as you can see, the spending line just continues on. So we have no system in place that brings this spending line into line with the revenues. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I have proposed in my budget. What I've proposed in my budget is let us be fiscally responsible. Let us only spend the money that we have. And what we have is this, that our revenues are $96 billion, like I said earlier, but our spending goes up to $101.4 billion. So we cannot go and continue with this. And as you can see, it separates even further. And if this extends, I don't know if you have, we have one here. Here it continues. It gets further and further apart. Here we are $10 billion apart between spending, every year between spending and the revenues. So that's the kind of deficit we would have every year if we don't do anything about it. Here is a chart which shows to you if we do our budget correction and change our budget system, those two lines will come together again. So this is what I'm proposing basically this year, is to make sure that we change the budget system so those two lines come together. Now, of course, when you try to bring those lines together, here the spending line to the revenue line, that's when everyone says, oh, you're cutting our programs. But really, in the end, what we're doing is not cutting programs, because we're still spending this amount of money. We are just spending what we have. That's all we can do. Because, like I said, we can't borrow for ongoing programs. Now, there's people that say, well, why don't we raise taxes? Well, that would be the worst mistake, because this problem that we have cannot be corrected through taxes. Because every 3 to 4 years, you have this situation where it goes out of whack, where the spending goes higher than the revenues is. So if every 3 or 4 years or 5 years you would increase taxes, but now if you go back a few decades, but now we will be at 100% paying taxes. You would wipe out the economy and everything. So that's why I say it's not like taxes is a villain, but it's just this particular problem. You cannot tax your way out of that problem. That is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we should correct our budget system so we bring those two things in line. That's the fiscally responsible thing to do. That's what we ask businesses to do. That's what all of you do. When you see 1 year your revenues go down, then you start cutting back on some of the expenses. That's what families do, and that's what the state also ought to do. The problem only is in politics that politicians, every time they go out and they campaign to get elected, they promise the world to people. They promise things. And so what happened, for instance, in 1999, when we saw this increase in revenues, immediately they expanded a lot of the social programs and they promised everyone everything. And then they couldn't keep those promises. Now they can keep the promises. Now they're schwitzing up there. They're saying, wait a minute, we promised the people we're going to take care of them. Yes, ideally, let me tell you something. We are not talking about that money goes to wasted programs. I mean, that I can tell you. I've been up there long enough. There is no program that is wasted. I mean, you have people, money that goes towards AIDS patients, that is extremely important money. Money goes towards higher education, which is extremely important. Creating more teachers, creating more math and science professors, all of those things. I mean, it goes to good cause. But you only can spend what you have. That is the bottom line. And that's what we are trying to do. And I think that the key thing for us is to keep our eye on the ball and to always also calculate in that we have to think about not only the social programs, but that we have to think also about the infrastructure. Because for 3 decades, the state has not built anything because we always say, look at this, we don't have the money. we owe more money to social programs. And so they never have enough money to build. So what happened is that we have now an infrastructure in the state of California that literally is for 18 to 20 million people, but not for 37 million people, because since the 60s, when Pat Brown stopped building and when Ronald Reagan actually stopped some of those buildings because he needed the money for other programs, and then Jerry Brown definitely did not build anything because he wanted to maybe be a little different than his father was. So the building basically has stopped. And so we have an infrastructure that's totally outdated. If it is in transportation, if it comes to schools, if it is our universities, if it's the levees, the water, we don't have secure water and safe water for the future. All of those things is not existing right now. So this is why last year, or I should say 2006, because now we're in 2008. In 2006, we were very fortunate. I proposed in my State of the State address that we should start rebuilding California. And I proposed a $68 billion infrastructure package. And they agreed to get to the ballot a $37 billion package. And then there was an additional $5 billion for water projects, so altogether $42 billion. So that was really our foot in the door to start rebuilding California for the first time in decades. But this is only scratching the surface. Like I said, it's getting the foot in the door. We really need now, because we have fallen behind so much over these decades, we need now $500 billion in order to really rebuild California. Now, there's no way that we have any of this money in the public sector. So this is why I've stressed this year in my State of the State address, I've stressed that we have to get into public-private partnerships, because public-private partnerships is really where the action is. We've seen it in British Columbia. We've seen it in other places all over the world. And the people are happy. In British Columbia, I was up there. I've seen them spending a lot of money on rebuilding the area. And the politicians are happy. The labor leaders are happy. Everyone is at work. The people are happy. And as I said, the future is happy because that's the only way to go. So this is what we want to encourage our political leaders in Sacramento and our elected officials to get more into. And, of course, these are all areas where I need your help, because the more you put the pressure on the legislators and the more you go up to Sacramento and let them know how important it is to rebuild California, because right now we, I would say, live up to maybe 75 or 80% of our economic potential in California. The reason for that is because of the infrastructure. If we were to have an infrastructure where we could get around, remember that economic power is how fast you move people and how fast you move goods. That's economic power. Well, you have gotten here to this place knowing that I know that you got stuck in traffic somewhere. That is the problem. I mean, everyone is getting stuck in traffic. Our ports are outdated. We have to bring them up to date. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be rebuilt. So I have a master plan and that really would rebuild California. But like I said, it needs a lot of support. It needs all of you to work as hard as you've done last year, or I should say 2006, when you all went behind that infrastructure and you pushed the legislators and also the people of California. Because remember, when I announced in 2006 in January our infrastructure package and our strategic growth plan, it only when they polled, it only got 32% in the polls. And then we went out, and I went up and down the state, and so did the Democrats with Senator Parada and Speaker Nunez and the Republican leaders. And there was Republicans and Democrats campaigning together, and the people finally got it. This must be something good when both parties are together campaigning together, which has never happened before. And that's the idea what we're going to do also with health care reform. When it passes, hopefully it will pass through the Senate. The Democrats and Republicans will get together and campaign up and down the state. And the same we will do with the infrastructure of all the things we're proposing. And the same we will do also with budget reform, because it's the only way you can do it is to find a way of getting both of the parties together, which is, of course, very tricky. Because I can tell you, because there's, on the Republican side, they are saying, well, we got to go, no taxes. On the Democratic side, there's the old traditional thing, we don't want to make the cuts. So you have, how do you bring those two together? But there's a way, because the mood in Sacramento, and this is one thing that I'm most proud of, is that the mood in Sacramento has changed. Democrats and Republicans are getting along much better than ever before. I've never seen this kind of thing. Not that they changed in positions or they changed philosophy, but they recognize how important it is to get things done. Because ultimately, we are not party servants, we are public servants. We have to serve the public, Democrats and Republicans alike, and independents, and everybody that is in this state. And so this is why I was very happy to see them actually working on these very important issues, and also to take on an issue like healthcare reform. I mean, as you know, a lot of you, this has been talked about for the last 100 years almost. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt has talked about, universal health care. And since then, nothing happened in Washington. Not that anything else happened this last year anyway. But, I mean, that's besides the point. But, I mean, it is really sad to see that we, in this state alone, have 6.7 million people that are uninsured. And so it's great to see both of the parties get together and talk about it, about the healthcare savings accounts, and talk about tax incentives, and talk about all the different kind of issues, and put all of these ideas together into one package and move forward with it. We could very well be the first state in the union that will have comprehensive healthcare reform if this goes through the Senate. It will be staggering. And like I said, it will reduce our hidden taxes 20% very quickly, just like in workers' compensation. It reduced the costs very quickly. All we have to do is just get going, get it reformed, and we will bring the healthcare costs down because of it, and all of those things. It would be advantageous for everybody. But the key thing now is for us is to fix the budget system so that we can move forward with the budget and we have a coherent budget. And the other thing I want to mention just quickly is this hurts our credit rating. Our budget system hurts our credit rating. And now our credit rating has improved several times since I've come into office. So that's good. But the risk is that we are going to get dropped down again a notch because of this situation. So this is why we have to show strong leadership. That's why I came out in my State of the State and talked about the budget. And again, in my budget presentation yesterday, I was trying to be as strong as possible to get the idea across that we got to fix the system. This is not just going from one year to the next and always trying to take these people for a roller coaster ride. And we got to be responsible in paying off our debt. We are suspending the economic recovery bond the payment because we always prepaid, because we almost have paid it off, by the way, the $15 billion from Prop 57, the $15 billion we got in order to start paying the bills in California. It's almost paid off. So we have really done and accomplished extraordinary things. This has to be solved. This crisis has to be solved. And then I think we are home free with the whole thing. And this is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Like I said, I will need your help on that. So anyway, with that, I hand it back over to you. And if there's any questions about any of that, please feel free to ask. And if I cannot answer something, like I said, we have the budget geniuses here.
Terrific. Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. We have an opportunity now for questions. I have one from our chairman, Ray Holdsworth, who is in Hawaii today, or he would be here to greet you himself. But he shares your passion for not only investing in the physical infrastructure of this state, but the human infrastructure of this state. And you and he have talked, and you and our organization have talked about the importance of career technical education, vocational education, training the workforce of the future. We work with your administration and your community colleges on the California Transportation and Logistics Institute to train the workers in that critically important area of our state's economy. And I wonder if you might talk a little about your continued commitment to career technical education and to training the workforce that will keep us globally competitive.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that it is extremely important to recognize that we need the workforce. And in America, for some reason, especially here in California, I have seen that people that want to learn a specific profession, like, for instance, being a carpenter or being a computer technician or being a nurse, any of those professions, they're not really looked at on in the same way as if you go for your 4-year college degree. In America, it's all about the 4-year college degree. And I know in my own family, I mean, kids are being sent off, and Catherine, my oldest daughter, now is applying to various different universities. But if you ask her, what do you want to study, she has no idea. And in most cases, that is the situation. Because people are just stressing 4-year college rather than finding out what do you want to do when you grow up. That's the way it was in Europe. So I, for instance, wanted always to be a salesman. That was the thing. So no one could figure out why. But nor did I know then how you have to sell no matter what, all your life. I'm still selling now policies, right? So I'm always selling. But then I sold bodybuilding and my movies and all those things. So it came in handy. But I want to be a salesman. So my parents sent me to a career tech education school where you become a salesman, where you learn how to sell. So at the age of 15, I dropped out of regular school, which was called the Hauptschule. You went to school until you were 15 years old, and then you went to career tech education school. And there you learn how the craft of selling. And you worked part-time in a place where you actually sold goods and dealt with customers and did inventory and did the accounting and wrote business letters and did all of those things and got really good in math. And then after, with the 18, of course, I went to the military, but I never realized how important that would be. And only when I came over here to California, I then decided I want to go to college, and then I went to community college and to UCLA and so on, and got eventually graduated. But I mean, why not let people go and support, and don't call one thing the higher education and the other thing, what is it, the lower education? Oh, you're the foreheads or something like that, low foreheads. So I mean, it's that attitude here that is wrong. And so I think that's just why, and you know, whenever you take on a job like that, inevitably a little bit of your background always comes into this. And so, of course, I grew up in Europe where career tech education was extremely important, equally as important as universities, because they appreciated, like I said, mechanics and carpenters and salesmen and computer technicians, and all this as much as they did a doctor or a lawyer or other professions. So to me, I wanted to stress that here, and I wanted to start really putting money into career tech education. And also when we did the bonds, to build and to put $500 million into the bond money to build more career tech education facilities, because we got to take care of the kids, because we have right now 15 to 30% of the kids dropping out of high school because they don't see the future of going on and going to university or something like that, because that is not for everybody. So this is why we should give them hope, and we should have career tech educational facilities kind of work together with the high schools and to create professions and help those kids along so we don't have those dropouts, and that we have a great goal for them and a great future for those kids also.
Thank you. We appreciate your leadership on that and look forward to working with you. I know there's some questions here. Maybe you could stand up and introduce yourselves. I saw Mayor Kelly McDowell of El Segundo first. So.
Thank you, Bill. Governor, first of all, thank you for yesterday. Speaking of salesmanship, how confident are you that you can sell the legislature on maintaining that same strong commitment, not just in this special 45-day session, but in the budget to come right after that?
I think that it's very clear that when I spoke to the leaders, Democratic and Republican leaders, they all made it clear that they understand and they get it, that we have a budget system problem, that the budget system itself needs to be fixed. So you understand, the emergency session, the 45 days, is only to go and make mid-year cuts, which means the fiscal year that started last year in July and goes to end of this June. So we don't want, because right now, as I said in my State of the State address, we are spending $400 to $600 million a month more than we are taking in. And we have no system in place to stop it. I mean, think about that. I mean, how crazy is that? And so what we are doing now is luckily through Proposition 58, we now can hold this special session. And now that gives the legislators 45 days to solve the problem and to make certain cuts. Now, my proposal was to make those cuts, like I said, instead of the $1.4 billion in education cuts that are over-appropriated, only to cut the $400 million, and there's $400 million from other areas that we can cut. That's all we can do, because there's certain things that you can't just cut from one day to the next. And this is why it's important to have the session right now, because it takes several months. Like, for instance, if you cut anything in healthcare, there's certain things that have already been paid. They will only have an effect maybe 3 or 4 months later. Or if you cut, for instance, in prison, in order to have that have an effect, sometimes takes 6 months. So this is why it's important to have this now, to have the 45 days and to maybe cut $800 million to $1 billion from this year, so that we don't go that deep into the hole. And I think what is important also is that to know that 45 days later, if they can't come to a conclusion, after that I can extend the period and call again another emergency session. By that time, the legislators are not allowed to do anything else but to just deal with the budget. That just is, again, written in so that they're inspired to get it done as quickly as possible, because all other things will come to a grinding halt. They can't do any of the other things. So but again, I'm convinced they will be able to do that very quickly. And then after that, separately from then, we then will go and talk about the coming year, the next fiscal year that is approaching very quickly. As you know, May 14th, I will hand in my recommendations there, and then by July 1st, we will have to have a budget. So they will talk then about that, and also at the same time to budget reform, to reform the system, because whatever we do and whatever we decide, any reform will have to go on a ballot in November, because only the people can make those changes, not the legislators. So this is the way it works. And so I have, again, like I said, confidence that both of the parties will come together. It will not be easy. It will be a major, major struggle. But I never shy away from struggles. I mean, this is why I took this job. I didn't go and become governor and wanted to become governor because I thought I can just kick back or play golf or have just a good time. I'm having a good time what I'm doing. I love my job. But it's without any doubt the most challenging thing, and you have the most responsibility of anything that I've ever done. It is fun, but I know we're going to get it done. I'm very optimistic about that.
Thank you, Governor. I know we have more questions. I'm going to hand the mic so that if you'll just introduce yourself to the Governor and ask your question, David.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. David Wright. I'm with Plains All-American Pipeline. My company, along with a number of other companies, have major projects. This is private money that we would like to build in the ports and around the cities and around the counties, but we're forever held up with the permitting process, the CEQA process. In our case, we've been held up almost 4 years trying to get a major project in the port built. We would love to add to the revenue line, but our hands are tied. Is there a way to break that logjam and move these things forward?
Well, each situation with CEQA is different. There's some areas like where we were very successful and built very quickly, like public transportation. There was several projects that was put aside where it didn't almost go to any CEQA reviews at all, and we just started building. And I think that this is the important thing that we do in the future now, because I think since in the private sector some of the building has slowed down so much, we want to make up for it in the public sector. So the more we can get that public money that the people have approved in 2006, in November of 2006, and get it so that we can start building all those big projects, the better it is. And sometimes we just have to speed up that CEQA process without getting around CEQA, because I think CEQA is good, but I mean we have to do it in an efficient way and in a really as fast as possible so we can put people to work. But if you give me a card, then we can look in the UK's, because like I said, a lot of those things, changes from one project to the next. Yeah.
Somewhat related question. We've talked a lot about system-wide EIRs for things like the Alameda Corridor East. I don't know if that has reached your desk or if you're aware of that concept, but instead of approving individual elements along something like the Alameda Corridor East, could we do system-wide EIR planning to try and advance the process?
Absolutely. But just remember one thing. There are people out there that do not like any progress. And there's people out there that don't like constructions. And there are people out there that don't like to have an increase in population. They think that each time we build something and we widen the roads or build a double-decker on top of our freeways, like I like to see, like we've seen in other places around the world, they think, oh, my God, that means that now we are accommodating for more people to come. But as I've said in one of my State of the State addresses, that we did not build anything for 3 decades, and people came anyway. We have seen an increase from 18 million people in the late 60s to now 37 million, and we are projected in the next 20 years to have 60 million people in California. Now, and I think a lot of you know, that any project that we agree upon today would take at least 10 years to finish. Like when we talk about water projects, which we're pushing this year, to build more above the ground and below the ground water storage, and to build more water delivery systems, and to fix the delta, and to fix its ecosystem and all those things. All of those things, if I look, I checked it out with the experts. They said to me, what you have proposed here would take 20 years to build. Now think about that. That means that when it's all finished, it's 20 years from now. By that time, we will have 60 million people. So therefore, we cannot think the day about building, instead of just for the 18 million people that this was built for, we should build for 37 million. No, for 60 million, because that's how long it would take. We have to build now for 60 million people. That's reality. And that's why I said we need over the next 20 years $500 billion in order to really rebuild California and to be again up to the standard where we ought to be.
Very good. Scott, I see you have a question.
Yes, Governor, I'm Scott Summers. What are we going to do, or what is your approach to the public employee retirement costs? They're very rapidly increasing. I remember reading a couple of years ago that under the previous administration, the California Highway Patrol went from retiring at age 60 with 75% of their salary to retiring at age 50 at 90% of their salary. Obviously, as people live longer and longer, it just seems we're looking at a tsunami of soaring costs there that are going to be rising automatically. How do you apply your budget approach to employee public sector retirement?
Well,
issues?
it's very hard to go back and just start renegotiating those things. You know, you can't take away from people what they've been promised and what has been bargained by the unions and all of those things. So I have had a commission study all of this unfunded liabilities that we have, which is in California. What is it now? It's about 45. It's about $46 billion unfunded liabilities on top of all of the things that we talked about. Just think about that. Eventually, we owe that also to the people that are working for our state. So it's just that is what I'm talking about when we talked about earlier, that as soon as revenues go up, then immediately politicians promise all kinds of things without any guarantee that that money will be there and those kind of revenues will be there on an ongoing level. They're not, because we have seen it always goes up and down. And so this is why it is important to look at all those things, first of all, to start thinking about paying those things. And number two, to look in the future when we make those deals to be more careful about it. But I think as soon as we fix the budget system, they will not be able to make the kind of deals that they have been making in the past, because they have to be much more realistic, because they know that they cannot hope for the good year where the revenues skyrocket, because when they do skyrocket, you take some of that money away for the rainy day fund. So I think that is the key thing, is to create a more even line between the revenues and the spending in the state.
Governor David Abel, Prop 98, you've taken it on once. You're proposing to take it on again. The public really doesn't understand much about it because there's very few conversations like this that go on television. But how are you going to be successful to modify that payback rule, even if you can reduce it 1 year, not to have to make it up the next year, and put our budget back in balance? How do you take that politically on?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think that I've tried, and I've said this many times, I've tried twice before in order to get budget reform. Let's assume for a second I did it 2 times the wrong way. I'm more than happy to say that. But whatever happened, whoever was here at fault that it didn't pass, was it the politicians, was it me that it was not inclusive enough, or that it was too radical, whatever it may be, it didn't pass twice. This time I promised that I would do everything in my power to be as inclusive as possible and as open-minded as possible to get that done. And I feel that if you're inclusive, where the other side that maybe wants to protect Proposition 98, that we can have really reasonable conversations and together figure out on how to create more stability for the children. Because no one, as you can see here, no one is trying to take away a dollar, because we always spend the revenues anyway. But all we want to do is let's not go 1 year up and the next year down. Let's even that out. Now with Proposition 98, we can suspend Proposition 98. But then it goes down again. So it's not fair to the children. What I want to do is create stability, so it's continuously every year it goes up and up and up as the revenues come in, and but the more even way rather than the roller coaster ride. That's what I'm trying to do.
Governor, I've only time for one last question. I see more.
Hi, Governor. Maura O'Connor. I'm a lawyer with Seyfarth Shaw. Governor, for those of us who are in the private sector, what can we do individually or collectively to help you in your fight to get more money put into infrastructure? We're all very concerned about this in Southern California because we're wasting hours and hours and hours of our people's time and millions, if not billions of dollars in people sitting in the freeways here.
I think that the only way that you get really things done is if you go and put the pressure on the legislators. I mean, just think about it. If you place every week an ad in the LA Times, full-page ad, to challenge Sacramento, meaning everyone, me, Democrats, Republicans, everyone, that we are counting on you to rebuild California. I mean, I tell you, this will be the main, in a short period of time, that will be the main conversation at the Capitol. And this is what helped us with health care reform. There were so many different entities out there in California that have put ads on television. There were TV spots out there. There were ads out there, everything. And they put the pressure on. The legislators felt that there is a need out there for health care reform. And they went about and they got as far as passing it now through the Assembly. And it could be that it will pass through the Senate also. So that's people power. You have to recognize that by sitting around, remember, you snooze, you lose. It's that simple. The more you're actively involved, the more you campaign, the more you call your legislators, the more you have those legislators come in here and talk to you, like I'm doing right now. If you have Senator Parado talk to you and then ask them the question and bombard them with the questions and put the pressure on them, and Speaker Nunez and Senator Ackerman and Assemblyman Valines, have all of them here in front of you and let them know that this is serious business. You need the infrastructure rebuilt. Here's the things that you need in order to really live up to 100% of your potential. Because like I said, our economy does not really operate on all 12 cylinders at this point because of the infrastructure, not because of you. I mean, I think that we have the most creative business people in the world right here in Southern California. I mean, I think the world of what businesses are doing here and, you know, the innovation and the creativity and all this and the hard work and really always reaching for the sky. But you get held back because of our lack of infrastructure. So it's not fair to you. So this is where you're paying your taxes. You have already paid for all of those things that's supposed to be right out there, but it's not. So now you have to put the pressure on the legislators, put the pressure on Sacramento, on all of us together. Not singling anyone out, just on all of us. Sacramento.
Governor, I see one gentleman saying he promises to make it a short question. Lloyd Gripe, please.
Lloyd Gripe, I'm an investment banker here in town, Governor. And you played an instrumental role in making putting California in a position where we could be more instrumental in selecting the next president by moving up the primary to Super Tuesday, which is a little over 2 weeks away. So in view of that, who gets your endorsement?
Can you turn off your cameras?
The former member of the board.
I haven't endorsed anyone yet because it wouldn't be to the best interest of California to endorse that early. I think it is nice when all the candidates are still trying to get my endorsement. They're all going to come in here to California. They're all going to campaign very hard. They're all going to spend money on television, which we need. And so I think everything is going exactly according to the plan. Now, when we did that, when we passed that law and we moved the date from June to February, I don't know if you remember seeing in the newspapers and everywhere in the media, that wouldn't help us at all. By that time it will be over. All the other states have moved the dates up. It doesn't mean anything. Well, no, not really. Things are quite different now. It's spoiling. They're already coming out here. I see them all. I get always the list of candidates that come out here for fundraisers and for making appearances and all those things. And it will really heat up this next 3 weeks, I can guarantee you. So I think it's wonderful because finally, after decades, finally California is back again in the game of making the decision on who should be our president, the next president. And I think that we are such a powerful state. You know, what I wanted to make sure of is, when I became governor, is to let the world know that we are the most powerful place there is. That everyone should look at us not just as a state, but as a nation. that we are powerful, we sell our goods overseas, that we can do trade with countries independently of Washington. We don't need, to wait for the federal government. We're not some little baby that is to wait for the parent to take care of us. No, we make decisions. We move forward. And this is exactly the attitude that we have with the environment. We don't wait for Washington, for the EPA Secretary Johnson to give us the okay that we can go and regulate our air. No, we sue him. We sue the federal government. We take them to court. They've lost already 4 court cases, and we will sue them again and again and again until we get the waiver so we can regulate our own air, because we are breathing our own air. We have the people die here in California of cancer because of the bad air. So why would we not be able to regulate it? And why would we not also make the decision on who the next president ought to be? We should make the decision. That's why February 5th is a great date for that. I'm glad we moved it up, and I was very happy that both Democrats and Republicans again agreed on that immediately. When I suggested that, there was immediate agreement, and we moved the date up. So those are the kind of things that we've been doing all along. Elevate California. We are not one of 50 states. Yes, in a way, when you look at the map, we're 50 states, but we are a special state. We are the Golden State. It's that simple.
If I can just wrap up by saying, Governor, we appreciate your leadership on all these issues we've discussed today. We appreciate your leadership of this state. We look forward to continuing to work with you to keep it globally competitive and to keep it the great golden state that it is. Thank you for spending so much time today with us.
My pleasure.
We look forward to working with you.
Thank you all. Happy New Year. Thank you.